Let me ask you something very honestly. How many of you are tired, not because you worked too hard, but because you thought too much? You lie on the bed, your body wants rest, but your mind says, let's replay everything. One small mistake becomes a full movie. One future worry becomes a sleepless night. And the saddest part, most of the things you overthink never actually happen. Overthinking is not a weakness. It is the mind's desperate attempt to feel safe in a world that feels unpredictable. When life becomes uncertain, when outcomes are unclear, the mind does not like to sit quietly. It starts creating scenarios, replaying conversations, imagining futures that may never arrive, not because it enjoys torturing you, but because it believes that thinking more will protect you from pain. The mind has one job: survival. It doesn't care whether you are peaceful or happy. It only cares that you are prepared. So it keeps asking, what if something goes wrong? And in doing so, it traps you in endless loops of worry. Most people misunderstand overthinking. They believe it happens because they are weak, anxious, or incapable of handling life. But the truth is far more gentle. Overthinking often happens to people who care deeply, who want to do the right thing, who fear making mistakes, and who don't want to hurt others or themselves. The mind says, if I analyze this one more time, maybe I can avoid regret. And so it keeps analyzing, it keeps digging, it keeps spinning. What starts as caution slowly turns into exhaustion. The problem is not that the mind thinks. The problem is that the mind does not know when to stop. It doesn't understand that not every situation can be controlled, predicted, or solved in advance. So it keeps you alert, tense, and restless, convincing you that thinking is equal to preparation. But preparation has a limit. Beyond that limit, thinking no longer protects you, it drains you. It steals your sleep, your energy, your confidence, and eventually your joy. When the mind overthinks, it often creates imaginary threats. It takes a small possibility and inflates it into a looming danger. A simple decision becomes a life-altering risk. A delayed message becomes rejection. A minor mistake becomes a permanent failure. The mind does this because uncertainty feels unsafe. And when something feels unsafe, the mind goes into overdrive, believing that if it stays busy, nothing bad will surprise you. Unfortunately, life does not work that way. You may have noticed this pattern: the more you think, the less clear you feel. Instead of finding answers, you feel stuck. Instead of feeling prepared, you feel overwhelmed. This is because overthinking is not about solving problems. It is about avoiding discomfort. It is the mind's way of saying, I don't want to feel fear, so I'll keep thinking until I feel in control. But control is an illusion. No amount of thinking can guarantee outcomes. And deep down, the mind knows this, which is why it never feels satisfied. Overthinking also keeps you in the future. It pulls you away from the present moment, where life is actually happening. While you are busy worrying about what might go wrong tomorrow, you miss the peace available to you right now. The mind thinks it is protecting you, but in reality, it is robbing you of the only moment where safety truly exists: the present. Safety is not found in predicting every possible outcome. It is found in trusting your ability to handle whatever comes. Many people try to stop overthinking by fighting their thoughts. They get angry with themselves. They say, why am I like this? Or, I should be stronger. But this only makes things worse. When you fight the mind, it resists harder. Overthinking doesn't disappear through force. It softens through understanding. The moment you realize that your mind is not your enemy, something shifts. You stop judging yourself and you start observing. And observation creates distance. When you observe your thoughts, you begin to notice a pattern. The mind repeats the same worries again and again. It doesn't create new information, it recycles old fears. Once you see this, you understand that thinking more is not giving you new answers, it is giving you the same fear in different disguises. And that realization is powerful. It tells you that you don't need more thinking, you need more trust. Trust does not mean being careless or irresponsible. Trust means believing that you are capable of handling life as it unfolds. It means knowing that even if something goes wrong, you will learn, adapt, and move forward. The mind overthinks because it doubts this ability. It assumes that a mistake will break you. But if you look back at your life honestly, you will see that you have survived moments you once thought would destroy you. That alone is proof that you are stronger than your fears. When you understand that overthinking is the mind's attempt to feel safe, you stop taking it personally. You stop labeling yourself as anxious or broken. Instead, you treat your mind like a scared child, acknowledging its fear without letting it control your actions. You say, "I see you. I know you're trying to protect me, but I don't need to panic right now." And slowly the mind begins to relax. The goal is not to silence the mind completely. That is unrealistic. The goal is to reassure it, to remind it that you don't need to predict every outcome to be okay. Life is not asking you to have all the answers. It is only asking you to take the next step with courage. And when the mind realizes that you trust yourself, it no longer needs to overthink. It can finally rest. Not every thought that enters your mind deserves your attention, yet most of us treat every thought as if it were a command or a warning. A thought appears, and immediately we react. We follow it, analyze it, argue with it, or try to fix it. But the truth is simple and uncomfortable. The mind produces thoughts the way the lungs produce breath, constantly, automatically, without asking for your permission. If every thought were important, you would be exhausted all the time. And many people already are, precisely because they believe every thought matters. A thought is not a fact. It is not a prophecy. It is not a reflection of who you truly are. It is just a mental event. It comes, it stays for a moment, and it leaves if you allow it to. The problem begins when you grab it, examine it closely, and start building stories around it. One small thought like, "What if I fail?" can quickly turn into a full narrative about disappointment, embarrassment, and regret. Not because the thought was true, but because you gave it attention. The mind does not filter thoughts based on usefulness. It throws everything at you: memories, fears, assumptions, fantasies, judgments. Some thoughts are helpful, some are neutral, and some are completely useless. But the mind does not label them for you. That is your responsibility. When you don't choose consciously, the mind chooses for you. And it almost always chooses fear, because fear feels urgent. Many people believe that paying attention to every thought makes them responsible and aware. In reality, it makes them mentally cluttered. Imagine if you answered every phone call, even from unknown numbers, spam, or prank callers. Your day would be chaos. Yet mentally, this is exactly what we do. Every thought rings, and we answer without question. We don't pause to ask, "Is this thought helpful? Is it true? Is it kind?" We just engage. Attention is energy. Whatever you give attention to grows stronger. When you repeatedly focus on negative thoughts, you train your mind to generate more of them. Over time, this becomes a habit. The mind learns, these are the thoughts that get attention, and so it keeps producing them. Not because they are correct, but because they are rewarded. This is why two people can experience the same situation and feel completely different. One feeds calm thoughts, the other feeds anxious ones. Learning not to give attention to every thought is not suppression, it is discernment. Suppression is pushing thoughts away with force, which only makes them return stronger. Discernment is simply noticing a thought and choosing not to engage. It is the quiet confidence of saying, I see you, but I don't need you right now. This takes practice because the mind is used to being in control. At first, it will protest. It will send louder thoughts, more dramatic stories. But if you stay consistent, it learns. Some thoughts sound very convincing. They use logic, emotion, and past experiences to sound important. They say things like, you should worry about this. If you don't think about this now, something bad will happen. But urgency does not equal truth. Just because a thought feels intense does not mean it deserves your time. Often, the most dramatic thoughts are the least useful. One powerful shift happens when you stop identifying with your thoughts. Instead of saying, I am anxious, you say, I am having an anxious thought. That small change creates space. It reminds you that you are the observer, not the thought itself. You are the sky, not the clouds. Clouds come and go. The sky remains untouched. When you understand this, thoughts lose their grip. The mind also loves repetition. It repeats thoughts not because they are unresolved, but because repetition feels familiar. Familiarity feels safe. So the same worries replay day after day, even when nothing new has happened. This can make you believe that something is wrong, that there must be an answer you haven't found yet. But often, there is no new answer, only the same thought asking for attention again, and again, and again. Peace does not come from having better thoughts. It comes from not engaging with unhelpful ones. You don't need to replace every negative thought with a positive one. That can be exhausting. Sometimes, the most powerful response is no response at all. Let the thought pass like a car on the road. You don't chase every car. You don't analyze where it's going. You just let it go. When you stop giving attention to every thought, you reclaim your mental freedom. You realize that silence between thoughts is not empty, it is peaceful. It is where clarity lives. It is where intuition speaks. And it is always available to you the moment you stop reacting to everything your mind says. With time, the mind learns a new pattern. It understands that not every thought will be entertained. And just like an uninvited guest who is no longer welcomed, those thoughts begin to knock less often. You don't need to control your mind. You only need to stop believing that every thought deserves your attention. Your intuition has always been there, quietly guiding you, even before you learn to overthink. As a child, you trusted your feelings without needing explanations. You knew when something felt right, and when it didn't, and you acted on that knowing without hesitation. But as life became more complex, fear slowly grew louder. Expectations, opinions, past failures, and the desire to be accepted began to drown out that inner voice. What was once natural became distant, not because intuition disappeared, but because fear learned how to shout. Fear is loud because it is urgent. It speaks in strong language, filled with warnings, consequences, and worst-case scenarios. It doesn't whisper, it demands attention. It says things like, don't do this, you might fail, or what if they judge you? Fear feels convincing because it uses emotion, memory, and imagination all at once. It paints vivid pictures of pain and regret, making them feel real even when they are only possibilities. And when something feels real, the mind reacts as if it already happened. Intuition, on the other hand, does not argue. It does not panic. It does not beg you to listen. It simply offers a quiet sense of knowing. a gentle pull, a calm inner nudge that says, "This is right for you," or "This is not your path." It often comes without reasons, which is why the logical mind struggles to trust it. We are taught to justify everything, to explain every decision. Intuition rarely gives explanations. It just gives direction. Because fear is loud and intuition is quiet, most people assume fear is more important. They confuse volume with truth. When fear speaks loudly, it feels like wisdom. When intuition whispers, it feels uncertain. So people choose fear, believing they are being practical or realistic. But fear is reactive. It is based on what might go wrong. Intuition is responsive. It is based on who you are and what aligns with you. You may have noticed moments in your life when you ignored your intuition and listened to fear instead. Maybe you stayed in a situation that felt wrong because it was familiar. Maybe you walked away from an opportunity because you were afraid of failing. And later, when things didn't work out, you thought back and said, "I knew it." That knowing was intuition. It spoke. You heard it. But fear was louder in that moment. Intuition becomes quieter when you don't trust it. Like any relationship, trust grows with use. When you repeatedly ignore your inner voice, it stops trying so hard to get your attention. Not because it leaves, but because it respects your choices. Fear, however, grows stronger the more you listen to it. Each time you obey fear, it learns that shouting works. So next time, it shouts even louder. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to hear intuition is constant mental noise. When the mind is always busy, there is no space for subtle signals. Intuition speaks in moments of stillness, in calm pauses, in silence. That's why your clearest insights often come in the shower, on a walk, or just before sleep, when the mind finally slows down. Intuition doesn't compete, it waits. Another reason intuition feels unreliable is because it doesn't always promise comfort. Sometimes intuition asks you to take a risk, to let go, or to step into the unknown. Fear immediately responds with resistance. It says, "This is dangerous," even when it's simply unfamiliar. Fear wants safety, not growth. Intuition wants alignment, not approval. And alignment often requires courage. Learning to trust intuition does not mean rejecting logic. It means allowing both to coexist, with intuition leading and logic supporting. Intuition shows you the direction. Logic helps you navigate the path. Problems arise when logic, driven by fear, takes control and questions every step before you even begin. At that point, intuition has no room to breathe. Your body often senses intuition before your mind understands it. A feeling of ease, a sense of expansion, or sometimes discomfort, tightness, a subtle resistance. These signals are not random. They are intelligence beyond thought. Fear, in contrast, usually brings tension, urgency, and restlessness. Learning to notice these differences helps you distinguish between the two. Trusting intuition is a practice, not a talent. It grows when you take small steps based on inner knowing and see that you survive, even when things don't go perfectly. Each time you listen and act, you build confidence. Each time you ignore it, fear gains ground. The goal is not to eliminate fear. Fear will always exist. The goal is to stop letting fear be the decision maker. When you slow down, create silence, and stop overanalyzing, intuition naturally becomes clearer. You don't need to search for it. You need to stop drowning it out. And when you finally hear it again, you realize something powerful. Intuition was never weak. It was just patient, waiting for you to trust yourself enough to listen. Most people believe that if they think long enough, clarity will eventually appear. They sit with decisions for days, weeks, sometimes months, replaying the same questions again and again, hoping that one more round of thinking will finally give them certainty. But what usually happens is the opposite. The more they think, the more confused they feel. This is because clarity is not a product of thinking alone. Clarity is born from movement. It emerges when thought meets action. Thinking is useful at the beginning. It helps you understand the situation, weigh options, and consider consequences. But thinking has a limit. Once that limit is crossed, thinking turns into rumination. At that point, you are no longer gaining new information. You are simply recycling the same doubts in different forms. The mind feels busy, but nothing changes. Action, on the other hand, changes the environment, and when the environment changes, your perspective changes with it. Clarity is experiential. You cannot fully understand something until you experience it. No amount of thinking can replace direct engagement with life. You can read about swimming, watch videos, and analyze techniques, but until you enter the water, you won't truly know how it feels. Decisions work the same way. You don't get clarity first and then act. You act and clarity follows. One of the biggest reasons people avoid action is fear of making the wrong choice. They believe that a wrong step will permanently damage their life. So they wait, hoping that thinking longer will eliminate risk. But waiting is also a choice, and often a more damaging one. Indecision keeps you stuck in the same mental loop, while action, even imperfect action, gives you feedback. Feedback is information, and information brings clarity. Action breaks the illusion that everything must be perfect before you begin. When you take a step, you learn something real. You discover what works and what doesn't. You realize that some fears were exaggerated while others require adjustment. This learning cannot happen in your head alone. It happens only when you engage with reality. Clarity does not come from predicting the future. It comes from responding to the present. There is also something powerful that happens emotionally when you take action. The mind quiets down. Overthinking thrives in stillness without purpose. When you move, even in small ways, the energy shifts. Confidence grows not because everything is going right, but because you are participating in your own life instead of observing it from a distance. Action reminds you that you are capable. Many people wait for motivation before acting. They say, once I feel ready, I'll start. But readiness is often the result of action, not the cause of it. Motivation follows momentum. When you take one small step, the next step becomes clearer. The path reveals itself as you walk, not before. Life is not a straight line you can see from the beginning. It is a series of turns that appear one by one. Another reason clarity comes from action is because action exposes false assumptions. In your mind, things often feel bigger, harder, or scarier than they actually are. Once you act, reality either confirms or corrects those beliefs. This correction is clarity. Without action, assumptions remain untested and fear remains unchallenged. The mind fills the unknown with imagined difficulty. Action replaces imagination with experience. People often say, I need to be sure. But certainty is rare in life. If you wait for certainty, you may never move. Growth requires trust that you can adjust, learn, and recover. Action builds this trust. Each step you take, even if imperfect, shows you that you can handle uncertainty. And that realization is more valuable than any plan. Clarity also deepens through reflection after action. When you do something, you gain insight. You see what felt aligned and what didn't. This reflection is grounded in reality, not fear. It is informed by experience, not speculation. Over time, this process sharpens your intuition and decision making. You become clearer not because you think more, but because you live more consciously. Small actions matter. You don't need to make a dramatic move to gain clarity. Sometimes clarity comes from a simple conversation, a short experiment, or a minor change in routine. These small steps create data. They show you what resonates and what drains you. Waiting for a perfect, life-changing decision often keeps people frozen. Taking small steps keeps you moving. When you understand that clarity follows action, you stop treating decisions like life or death situations. You see them as experiments rather than verdicts. This mindset reduces pressure and opens space for curiosity. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you ask, "What can I learn?" And learning always brings clarity. In the end, life rewards those who engage, not those who endlessly analyze. Thinking prepares you, but action transforms you. If you want clarity, don't wait for it to arrive in your thoughts. Create it through experience. Take the step. The path will respond. Many people believe that before they move forward in life, they must be completely certain. Certain about the outcome, certain about their abilities, certain that things will work out exactly as planned. This belief sounds reasonable, even responsible, but it quietly traps people in hesitation. They wait for a feeling that rarely arrives, mistaking certainty for readiness. In reality, certainty is not a requirement for progress. Courage is. Life does not offer guarantees. If it did, growth would be easy and everyone would move forward without fear. But life is designed in a way where clarity often comes after the step, not before it. Waiting for certainty is like standing at the edge of a river, refusing to cross until the water stops flowing. It never will. Movement requires acceptance of uncertainty. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to move despite fear. When you expect certainty, you are asking fear to disappear first. But fear rarely leaves on its own. It softens only when it sees you act anyway. Each step you take without certainty weakens fear's authority and strengthens your self-trust. Over time, you realize that fear was never the problem. Avoidance was. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable because it challenges the mind's desire for control. The mind wants to know what will happen next so it can prepare, protect, and predict. When it can't, it creates anxiety. But anxiety is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are standing at the edge of growth. New paths always feel uncertain because they are unfamiliar. Familiar paths feel safe even when they are unfulfilling. Many people stay stuck not because they lack options, but because they are afraid of choosing the wrong one. They treat decisions as permanent judgments instead of temporary directions. But most decisions are not final. They are adjustable. You can change course, learn, and refine as you go. Courage is trusting that even if you choose imperfectly, you will find your way. Certainty often creates an illusion of safety. People believe that if they wait long enough, they will feel completely confident and then move without fear. But that moment rarely comes. Instead, doubt keeps finding new reasons to delay. The mind says just a little more time or one more sign. In truth, certainty is often built through action, not before it. When you act without certainty, something powerful happens internally. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle uncertainty. This identity shift is crucial. You stop seeing yourself as fragile and start seeing yourself as adaptable. You realize that your strength does not come from predicting outcomes, but from responding to them. That realization creates a deeper form of confidence, one that is not dependent on circumstances. Courage also teaches you resilience. When things don't go as planned, you learn that disappointment is survivable. Mistakes become feedback instead of failures. This reduces the fear of trying again. Over time, Uncertainty loses its threat because you trust your ability to recover. You stop asking, "What if it goes wrong?" and start asking, "What if I can handle it?" There is also a quiet freedom in letting go of certainty. You stop overburdening yourself with the responsibility of knowing everything in advance. You allow life to unfold instead of forcing it into rigid expectations. This openness invites opportunities you could never have planned. Some of the most meaningful moments in life come from paths you never anticipated. Courage does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is a small decision made quietly, sending a message, saying no, starting something imperfectly, leaving something that no longer aligns. These moments rarely come with certainty. They come with discomfort, doubt, and a racing heart. But they also come with honesty, and honesty is often the first step toward alignment. People who wait for certainty often admire those who seem fearless, but what they don't see is that fearless people are usually just more willing to act without knowing. They have learned through experience that uncertainty is not a barrier, it is a companion. It walks alongside growth, reminding you that you are stepping into something new. When you accept that certainty is not required, you stop postponing your life. You understand that courage is a choice you make repeatedly, not a trait you either have or don't have. Each time you act without full clarity, you strengthen that muscle. Each time you hesitate less, you reclaim more of your potential. In the end, life does not ask you to be certain. It asks you to be brave enough to begin. The path reveals itself through movement. Trust does not come from knowing the future. It comes from believing in your ability to face it. Most people fear mistakes, not because mistakes are painful, but because they attach meaning to them that goes far beyond the moment. A mistake is no longer just an error, it becomes a label. It becomes proof that they are not good enough, not smart enough, or not capable enough. This is where the real damage happens. Not in the mistake itself, but in the story built around it. When a mistake is treated as a verdict on your worth, it stops being a teacher and starts feeling like a life sentence. But mistakes were never meant to define you. They were meant to guide you. Every mistake carries information. It shows you what doesn't work, what needs adjustment, and where growth is required. The problem is that many people are taught to fear mistakes from a very young age. Mistakes are punished, judged, or laughed at. Over time, this creates a deep association between mistakes and shame. So instead of learning, people hide. Instead of trying, they hesitate. A verdict closes the door. A teacher opens it. When you see a mistake as a verdict, you believe the story is over. You think, "This proves I can't do this." When you see a mistake as a teacher, you ask, "What is this trying to show me?" That one question changes everything. It shifts you from self-judgment to self-awareness. And awareness is the foundation of growth. Life itself is built on trial and error. No skill is mastered without mistakes. No relationship deepens without misunderstandings. No meaningful success comes without setbacks. Yet when it happens to us personally, we forget this universal truth. We expect ourselves to get everything right the first time, as if growth should be instant. This unrealistic expectation creates unnecessary pressure and fear, making even small missteps feel unbearable. Mistakes often feel heavier than they actually are because of overthinking. The mind replays them again and again, adding emotional weight each time. What could have been a simple lesson becomes a source of anxiety and self-doubt. But the replay does not change the past. It only drains the present. Learning happens once. Suffering happens when we refuse to let go. When you allow mistakes to be teachers, You begin to develop emotional maturity. You stop reacting with shame and start responding with curiosity. You realize that a mistake does not mean you failed, it means you attempted something. And attempting is always braver than avoiding. This perspective builds resilience. You become less afraid of trying because you trust that even if things go wrong, you will gain something valuable. One of the most powerful shifts is realizing that mistakes are temporary, but the lessons last. The discomfort passes. The embarrassment fades, but the insight stays with you. It shapes your future decisions, sharpens your judgment, and strengthens your character. In this way, mistakes quietly work in your favor, even when they feel painful in the moment. People who grow the most are not those who avoid mistakes, but those who recover from them quickly. They don't dwell, they don't self-punish. They reflect, adjust, and move forward. This ability to bounce back is far more important than getting things right all the time. Perfection creates rigidity. Learning creates adaptability. Mistakes also humanize you. They remind you that you are not meant to be flawless. They create humility, empathy, and understanding toward others. When you accept your own mistakes, you become less judgmental of others. You listen more. You connect more deeply. You realize that everyone is learning, just at different stages. There is also freedom in accepting mistakes as part of the process. You stop living in constant fear of doing something wrong. You give yourself permission to explore, to experiment, to be imperfect. This freedom unlocks creativity and confidence. You become willing to take chances, knowing that even failure will teach you something useful.